So, good morning and a very warm welcome to our very first student seminar, and which is organized by the Department of English Literary Society, which we have very warmly and fondly named Chrysanthemum. So, what happy is we already have about 57 participants, well, 58, including the speakers who've joined us today. And before I begin, there are still, friends of yours who are still joining. And before I begin, I must really, really thank my colleagues. Uh, just a moment, because Tajmira, yes, just stop presenting. Yes. So before we begin, I must really, really, from the bottom of my heart, thank Professor Dulal Shorkar and Professor Pompi Bhattacharya, who have warmly, suspended their classes today. And the fact that, we as a department, we want to give the message that, academic development is not about blindly, having classes without any purpose. So ultimately, the purpose of all our classes is to bring out that sensitivity and that awareness inside you, so that you become individuals who will be able to negotiate with the structures of society, deconstruct them, reconstruct them, locate points of departure, points of the system where, where one must, as individuals, if we don't really understand or negotiate with the system and its processes, then our education is not complete. So therefore, without much ado, let us begin with our seminar. So I think I always get confused, but as I said with the title, so I think Shomodeep is going to begin with the first paper. Am I right, Shomo? Are you the first speaker today?
No, ma'am, it's
It's Shogoto,
Shogoto. I'm the
right?
second speaker.
So right, I will. I knew that I would always jumble this up. So Shogoto, our first speaker for today, Shogoto Debnath, to be formal and precise. I can't really go formal with my students because the poised Shogoto, who sits in a corner of the classroom, is and he has this. I remember that whenever there is a season change, I can see him ear plugging his with a particular, with a protective thing, to kind of, so that, to stop himself from catching cold. And that has always caught my attention as a teacher, and I found it very fascinating because the other students didn't have that on, but he particularly had that on. And he always has this reflection of understanding things. So every time I introduced a new concept, he would kind of ponder deeply over it and go over serious about it, and then, ask me questions after the class or in the class. Generally, he's very shy and not very social as a being, but, I kind of cajoled him into, kind of spreading his wings out, because he's so talented, and he has a way into thinking process. So therefore, I would really be happy to hear him out today. And all said and done, I am really in the dark about this anime culture, because it's so much into vogue with adolescents these days. So we thought that, we could bring that and maybe get into the popular culture, and maybe you can compare your animations with the popular culture text that we have, whether it is Tintin, whether it is Alice in Wonderland. So I hope that this paper is a fruitful venture for all of us who are going to answer papers on popular culture, and later on for students who will be studying masters in the subject, or even if you change your field, to be able to know about popular culture is very important, because even the web series that you see are all part of the popular culture. Even the star jolsha that our parents or our mothers warmly watch at home in the evenings, even they are a part of popular culture. So it's very important for us to really understand what goes on behind the making of these cultural texts, and what goes on behind the liking and disliking of these particular processes. So Shogoto, I welcome you to the seminar, and I would request you to start your presentation. Over to Shogoto Debnath.
Um, okay, afternoon, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity. It's wonderful to be a part of Chrysanthemum. So now, without wasting any time, I will start my presentation. Is it visible on the screen? Please response.
Just a moment,
Yes, it
Shogoto.
is.
Okay.
Okay. If it is seen in a small size, please expand it with your by using your fingers. So I will begin. So the topic of my presentation is Kids on the Slope, a manga, and the jazz music. In this presentation, I will discuss about a brief history of manga and the critical sides of my favorite manga, Kids on the Slope. So, in general, manga refers to the black and white Japanese comics with right to left reading style. The manga is originated from scrolls dating back to the 12th century during the Edo period. Toba Ihon, as you can see his name on the screen, embedded the concept of manga. Hokusai Rakuten first used the term manga. Sato Kyoden's picture book named Shiji no Yukikai is very typical name in Japanese. You can see the spelling on the screen. Is considered as the first published manga. Manga becomes worldwide popular soon. In China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, it is known as manhwa. In South Korea, as manhwa manga. Manga, but we have to remember one point that these comics are colorful, unlike black and white Japanese mangas. Manga's animated adaptation comes into existence for its huge popularity that is known as anime. The further discussion about the history of anime will be continued by my classmate Shomodip Islam. For today's discussion, I have chosen a manga named Kids on the Slope or Sakamichi no Apollon in Japanese, written by Yuki Kodama. The story of the manga is mainly focused on jazz music and friendship. Now, let's have a look on the history of jazz music to understand the background of the manga more clearly. Jazz music originated in the African American communities in New Orleans because if we look at its geographical significance, New Orleans is an important port where many cultures and beliefs intertwined together. Same goes for Sasebo, Yuki Kodoma's home city. Yuki Kodoma is the director of the situated in Nagasaki. Sasebo was an important naval port of Japan during World War II. Yuki Kodama has written Kids on the Slope from her childhood memories of Sasebo city. From 1920 to 1933, alcoholic beverages were banned throughout the USA. It was considered as the Prohibition era. But in that time, there were many speakeasies, means illegal bars, providing a large number of jobs to the jazz musicians. Jazz music was played in these speakeasies as a countercultural type of music to fit in with the elite environment. This era was also known as the Jazz era. F. Scott Fitzgerald, who has written the Crack Up that is in our text, was F. Scott Fitzgerald was a notable figure of this era. Soon jazz was promoted and popularized by the criminal world. So we can see here jazz has a some kind of connection with the world of crime. In the manga, Yuki Kodama cleverly portrays the character of Sentaro. As you can see his picture on the screen, a teenage jazz drummer who is the son of an American serviceman and a Japanese mother, was orphaned at a very young age. Sentaro used to be an aggressive delinquent who was always involving in fights. Maybe we can say the writer wanted to show the connection of the criminal world with jazz music by the portrayal of the character Sentaro. We should always remember Sentaro was an American Japanese. His identity may suggest the foreign roots of jazz music. Jazz is a multicultural music. From Africa, jazz got its rhythm. From Europe, jazz got its instruments. On the other hand, we also have the character of Kaoru Nishimi. You can see his picture on the screen. He comes from a wealthy family, also a well-skilled pianist. He has moved to his uncle's house in Kyushu in the summer of 1966. He is a totally opposite character of Sentaro. He is shy and more reserved, what we say in a sense of introvert. He used to love classical music, but Sentaro's company inspired him to love the jazz music. There is also another important character, Ritsuko Mukae, Sentaro's childhood friend. She always works as a mediator between Karo and Sentaro. She has a great role in the building of the friendship between Karo and Sentaro. First in the manga, she has romantic feelings for Sentaro, but soon she develops romantic feelings for Karo as the story progresses. These three are the main characters of the story. The whole story of the manga goes around the friendship between Sentaro and Karo. The manga has 50 chapters, but our discussion will be limited to 12 chapters only. So, as you can see on the screen, it is a scene from the chapter 1. This scene has a great significance. Here, as we can see, Kaoru is running towards the rooftop of the school building. In his way, he sees that someone is lying on the bench and his body is covered with a white sheet. Here, the white sheet works here as a cultural, economical, and social barrier between Kaoru and Sentaro. After that, in the same scene, Sen grabs Kaoru's hand and says to him, "So you are here to take me away." Actually, Sen thinks Kaoru as an angel who will take his soul. It seems that he was waiting for this for a long time. Actually, Sentaro was pretty much lonely. He had only one friend, Ritsuko. He was an orphan, and moreover, he was always discriminated for being a delinquent, and the other persons were also afraid of him. But although this scene has a great significance, we can see here the encounter between two opposite worlds for the first time. And if we compare these two characters, we find two total. Karo was rich. Sentaro was poor. Karo was living in his uncle's house with his aunt and cousin. But Karo was pretty lonely because he did not have good relations with them. On the other hand, Sentaro had many siblings who loved him. Sentaro, a delinquent, not a good student who loved only jazz music. On the other hand, Karo was shy, introvert, but a very talented student who used to prefer classical music before meeting Sentaro. In the chapter 2, it is a scene from the chapter 2 as you can see on the screen. Both Karo and Sentaro run towards the rooftop with their umbrellas by skipping their classes while it is raining. Sentaro throws down his umbrella and starts getting wet in the rain. Sentaro also offers Karo to feel and enjoy the starts to hesitate. Then Sentaro is saying to him in this scene, "What are you afraid of, scaredy cat?" Actually, Karo comes from an elite family. He was raised with regulations and restrictions like other elite kids. So he never knew the taste of freedom before. So Karo first gets introduced to jazz music in chapter 3 when Ritsuko, Sentaro's childhood friend, invites Karo to her father's shop where he meets Sentaro again. In this scene, we find the typical view of Karo about jazz music. When he hears Sentaro playing drums, he gets pretty much annoyed to hear such kind of rough music. Actually, in the late 19th century, pop culture was highly condemned by the professional artists who saw pop culture as the declination of civilization. You can relate it to Karo's typical attitude towards jazz. But subconsciously, in the next scene, we can see Karo started to like this jazz music. So in chapter 4, we can see here the entry of a new character, Junichi, who participated in the Zenkato movement, a student movement against Japanese government's capitalist monopoly. It was also a reaction against American imperialism after World War II. The fact that Junichi was a jazz trumpet player is pretty ironical in its own way. But he was always idealized by Sentaro as an elder brother. Junichi's style and body language were pretty much Western. It also shows the Western influence on Japanese culture. In chapter 5, Sentaro saves a girl named Yurika from delinquents and develops a crush on her. I will later talk about this character. You can see her picture on the screen. So, in chapter 10, we can see the story about Junichi's college life and his involvement in the Zenkato movement. Junichi never joined the student sect, but he was greatly adored by a student leader for his wonderful orientation skills. As you can see some of the pictures of the Zenkato movement in this slide. So in the next slide, one of his bandmate. Actually, in his college life, Junichi was of a band, and one of his fellow bandmates joined the Zenkato student movement. And in this scene, this bandmate was shown to read Das Kapital, that is considered as the Bible of communism. But in the next scene, this bandmate gets prettily injured because of the police brutality that was carried out to suppress the student protest. And after that incident, he could not play the saxophone anymore. Due to his love for music or fear, Junichi refused to join the Zenkato movement and quit the college, and he was also disowned by his family. But this horrible past and the guilt of leaving everyone is still always haunting him down. In the same chapter, we can see romance between Eureka and Junichi, but June never wants to let her getting involved in his uncertain life. Eureka is the same girl on whom Sentaro develops a crush. But in this scene, Eureka cuts her long hairs. It also symbolizes she abandons her elite identity to be with June. Eureka comes from a wealthy family. She is also a talented artist. So we can here see the overlap between two different classes, both in the case of June and Eureka, or in the case of Karo and Taro. But at the end, we can see that Junichi at last accepts her love and leaves the town with her. In chapter 12, Sentaro gets involved in an accident in which he and his sister Sachiko becomes injured. Sentaro blames himself for it. So, as you can see, it is also a significant scene. In this scene, the scene from the chapter 1, if you can remember, somehow repeats again here. Here, Sentaro is again lying on a bench and his body is covered with a white sheet. Karo finds him and removes the white sheet from his body. Like the first scene, Sentaro mistakes Karo again for an angel. Sentaro here is saying, the angel appears again. Could you spare Sachiko and take me instead? So Sachiko is the sister who got injured in the accident. But Karo tries to make him understand again and again that it was not his fault. But at last, Sentaro disappears, leaving his rosary behind that he always used to wear. Here, perhaps rosary symbolizes as a guardian charm for Sentaro. Rosary is some kind of, it is related to Christianity, but you have to remember that Sentaro was a Catholic. It becomes more clear from the statement of the priest. Here, it is the statement of the priest that I am. The reason why he has kept the rosary so close to him was because if he had let it go, he was afraid of that. He felt that he would be cut off from the rest of the world. After that, Karo also leaves the city because he got admission in the medical faculty of Tokyo University. The story may end here according to my opinion, but it has a good ending. I have consolidated the last parts of the manga, so I will only present the summarized version of the ending. So as you can see on this slide, after many years have passed, now Karo becomes the doctor because Karo got admission in the medical faculty of the Tokyo University, and he was also a very talented student. One day he sees a picture of a marriage in which the prize winner looks like Sentaro. Karo starts to search, and he finds Sentaro, who is now a priest. From a delinquent to a priest, this transformation is pretty ironical in its own. It may suggest that after so much criticism of the pop culture, at last it was accepted in the civilized society. It was my interpretation. And we can also see that Junichi and Yurika are married and have children. Karo becomes married with Ritsuko, Sentaro's childhood friend. Karo, Sentaro, Ritsuko, and Junichi all become reunited at the end of the story, and they celebrate their reunion by playing the jazz music. So the story ends. So the story of everlasting friendship, the story of freedom of life through jazz music, the story of love ends in this way. So it is my whole presentation that I have presented. And so at last, I just want to say thank you very much. I hope this presentation has been some sort of help towards your exposure of this new area.
Thank you so much, Shogoto. That was a wonderful presentation, and I would say that it was crisp, and you maintained the time limit. So that's a very important quality of a good presenter. Now we will move on to our next paper because we will take the questions at the end of the two paper to compact the time. So our second paper will be presented by Shomodip Islam, um, who is the something that I relate with this chap is the fact that he has a very bright visage about him, and he is unruly, and that makes him a little attractive. I wouldn't say that that it is negative about it. I would say that it is very attractive that he's a little unruly, not very disciplined at times, gets up late, ends up coming to classes late, but he has a very bright critical approach to things around him, and I really feel very happy to have taught him, to have I mean still teaching him, and I hope that this brightness about him will really help him to carve a niche in the world as after he steps out completing his grads. So okay. Monish reminds me that how can I forget his Potter's car? I mean, of course, the chosen one. And we will definitely have an exciting session on Potter. Maybe once things get back to the old normal, even if not, because Potter and online, well, I mean, it may not give us all the fun. So maybe we will have an exciting one once we get back to the old normal, maybe decorating the room with the Potter style, and with that spooky Potter style, and then have the presentation. So over to our second speaker, Shomodip Islam.
Hello, ma'am, and thank you to everyone for this chance to present here. Uh, First of all, I would like to apologize to everyone since the date has to be moved from 20th August to today because of my health issues. I've been down with a very nasty cold for almost 2 weeks, and it's been a very concern of mine to whether I could present this or not. But thanks to the doctor and the medicines I have here, so let's get started. Okay, is the screen visible? Please say something.
Yes.
Okay, so let's get started. My presentation is on the history of anime and its genres. So let's talk about anime first. Uh, as we all know, anime is a word that can conjure up images of many things, depending on who you are, of exciting adventures or stylized art, or someone commenting about their current obsession. But in Japan, the word refers to any kind of animation at all. Although the rest of the world has adopted this word specific to mean specifically animated from Japan. Now we can ask why the distinction. Isn't animation just a bunch of moving drawings, no matter which country you draw them in? We don't have a specific, well known word for animation from any other part of the world. But anime did came to be regarded as a special case and grew into a stylized medium that we know and love today. So, how did it turn into this gigantic medium? Well, the story starts almost a century ago. The very first anime that we could find these days is called Katsudo Sanshin. According to Natsuki Matsumoto, it is the very first anime produced in Japan that could be stemmed from as early as 1907. Its name Katsudo Sanshin translates into activity photo. This 3-second film strip depicts a boy who writes this exact sentence, activity photo, removes his hat and bows. The frames were stenciled in red and black using a device for making magic lanterns lights, and the film strip was fastened in a loop for continuous play. Now, the 35 mm celluloid strip was lost until 2005 when it was discovered in Kyoto and then appraised by Natsuki Matsumoto, thus earning the name the Matsumoto Fragment. This is the first ever anime. More certain and concretely datable are several films from 1917-18 made separately by Oten Shimokawa, Junichi Kochi, and Seitaro Kitayama. And this is what we call the first piece of films. These are called nitrocellulose films on which the first animes were made. Now, these were extremely flammable and very much filmy, not exactly a good recipe for preservation. So, that's why many of the original Japanese animes that are cannot be found these days, as the reels were all reconstructed almost after they were finished. And what survived this practice was largely lost due to the Great Kanto earthquake in 1923, and many film studios and theaters were destroyed in the bombings of World War II or simply disintegrated over time. Now, let us talk about the 1930s, the next technology, 1930s and 40s, the technology and war. Now, the first anime talkie is now lost, though, was Chikara to Onna no Yo no Naka, the world of power and women. This It was released on April 13, 1933. It was a rather salacious story about a man having an affair with his secretary after growing tired of his domineering wife. Feminism was not a big concern in animation at that time, so you know this. Now, the animating with cells and characters and moving elements pointed on transparent sheets of celluloid layered over each other, and a background was a vast improvement over the chalk and paper cutouts that used to be uh, used before. But it was a much bigger expense. Studios had to get more creative in finding sources of funding. Promotional videos made and paid for by the government flourished as the military turned their hands to propaganda on the civilian side. However, educational films were made for commercial companies. All of these uses of anime continue today. Now, developments continued over the following decades, but during the period of Second World War, much of the animation produced in Japan had a propagandizing nature. This includes Momotaro Uminashimpe, or in English, as we say, Momotaro's Divine Sea Warriors, which came out in 1945 and was the country's first feature-length anime film. Its innate hope for peace emotionalized and young Osamu Tezuka. We'll talk about him later. Now, between 1933 and 1938, Norakuro was also another notable anime film series to come out of the Warriors. It told the story of a hard-working Japanese soldier characterized as a black and white dog. The other Japanese soldiers in the story were also dogs, while soldiers from other nations were pigs. Norakuro became depoliticized after the war, and in the 90s it became a mascot for the physical training school of Japan's present-day military equivalent, the Japan Self-Defense Force or JSDF. The 1950s. After the war, we begin seeing names recognizable to even casual anime fans today. Now, Japan Animated Films was founded in 1948, but we know them as Toei, the film company which bought them in 1956 to create an animated division. They released Hakujaden, The Tale of White Serpent, in 1958. With a runtime of 78 minutes, it was the first feature-length colored anime film. It would come out in America 3 years later. Hakujaden was not the only first anime to cross the Pacific. And these days, many the film fiction those have been shipping each other reels since the beginning of the medium. But it emphasized that market overseas could be lucrative source of additional revenue. With its colorful characters and easily replaced dialogue, anime was essentially easy to port across the seas. Depending on the hope for market, anime was and still is often deliberately set in places outside of Japan, otherwise downplays its national origin to make it more palatable to overseas audiences and wallets. But as I know, remembering Osamu Tezuka, by the late 1950s, he'd become a very popular manga artist, and by pretty popular, I mean he's now essentially referred to as the god of manga. In 1958, he began working with Toei to animate his series Boku no Son Goku, or Son Goku the Monkey King. During his time with Toei, Tezuka would prove to be a bit rebel-rouser, agitating for unionization. After his contract expired, he left to found his own studio, Mushi Production, aka Mushi Pro, for short. And he took some of Toei's best animators with him, including animator in Japan we know of, Kazuko Nakamura. She would later serve as the animator and director of Riven no Kishi, or Princess Knight. Even if you haven't heard of Mushi Pro, if you have seen any anime at all, it's very likely that you have seen the work of at least one animator from them. Ah. Now on to the 1960s. Beginning in the 1960s, the history of anime becomes much more dense. And so only a few highlights of many are included here. In the 1960s, the production of the first anime title started, which later would become known in the West.
Okay.
It was also a landmark decade for two other reasons. It featured the birth of the televised anime series such as Otogi Manga Calendar, which included some non-animated portions. It was a very good anime that talked about what happened today and used many of the historical approaches of that specific day. And it went on to be a very large series. And also Astro Boy. It also saw the creation of the first anime of the magical girl genre series called Sally the Witch. Now, prior to 1958, if you wanted to see animation, you had to go to a theater or have a really wealthy friend with a projector and access to reels. Now, television changed that. The earliest animation to air on the fledgling medium was Mogura no Adventure or Mole's Adventure. It was in color, used paper cutouts, and was 9 minutes long. 2 years later, in 1960, an experimental anime anthology called Mitsu no Hanashi, Three Tales, was created and aired by NHK as a special, comprised of three 10-minute segments telling fantasy tales. It would become the first anime to be aired on American television. In 1963, Tezuka and Mushipro debuted the very first anime series we could recognize as such, Tetsu and Atom or the Astro Boy. You can see the picture of him here. Based on one of Tezuka's most popular manga, the show starred a robot boy who lived with humans and regularly battled crime, aliens, and other robots. Anime had never been tried on TV in a half-hour segment before due to cost and deadline concerns. How could such a time-intensive process even be used to profitably air a show a week? Tezuka used what is called limited animation, techniques such as reducing the number of frames per second of film, reusing cells, and putting different layers of cells so that only the part of the body and moving needed to be animated in each scene. He also saved time by using his original manga panels as storyboards, eliminating much of the need to write and layout of the individual episodes. Many tropes of anime that we can see today are codified by Astro Boy, including big eyes, robot battles, and stylized hair impossible to achieve in normal gravity. It was the coolest thing on TV, and everyone loved it. Mostly, we could see. Its popularity surprised many of the more serious Japanese animators, as limited animation is comprised of literally cheap tricks. So, how can it compare to the fluid animation and artistry of carefully crafted films? Can limited animation be art? This argument about limited animation versus fluid animation is another aspect of anime that continues till today. Here you can see the image of the Sally the Witch, the first magical girl anime, which inspired the entire genre. Now, on the works of Osamu Tezuka. As I have told you, Osamu Tezuka was a manga artist who later became revered as the god of manga. He was an extremely prolific person and continued to draw stories until his dying day. As a matter of fact, his last words were reportedly a complaint when a nurse attempted to get him to stop working. Outside Japan, many Tezuka is most popularly known as the creator of Astro Boy, but within Japan, many of his other works are also famous. Tezuka created Kimba the Lion, or as its English dub name calls, Jungle Emperor, which was the first anime television series to be in color. and later was a topic of controversy among some who felt it was clearly part of the inspiration for Disney's The Lion King, although Disney denied this. Now, this Jungle Emperor is an interesting story. When the Astro Boy's first year was done on a small budget from Fuji TV, plus money from a candy sponsor, they were in quite a disturbance on whether they could continue it or not. So then came money from a very surprising source, the NBC in America. This enabled better animation quality for the later series, and also they liked Tezuka. So they proposed an idea for a new series, although in color, and paid for Tezuka's entire studio to transform into color. Now Tezuka was a very rebellious person, so he kind of kept implementing death scenes and continuity into the Jungle Emperor, and NBC kept editing it. It was a very fascinating war between them. Now, on to the next slide. Here you can see the Kimba the White Lion's picture, information about this. And I'm sorry, uh, something came up. Just a moment, please. Ah, the 1970s. Now, anime continued to grow and define itself in the 70s, especially in the science fiction. The first space opera series, Space Battleship Yamato, debuted in 1974 from Group TAC, yet another studio formed by former Mushi staffers. Now, by the end of 70s, anime was fully cemented as part of Japanese popular culture. Anime, a magazine devoted to anime and manga, debuted in July 1978, giving fans a place for the latest news and articles about their hobby. Soon the term otaku would be coined to describe those who were especially intense about this hobby. Now, two Japanese cultural institutions made their appearance in 1979. Sunrise released Mobile Suit Gundam, in which giant robots were given a grounded take in science and politics. This show wasn't actually too popular until Bandai Entertainment bought the merchandise rights and started releasing Gundam model kits. Since then, over 70 Gundam series, specials, and movies have been made, and hundreds of millions of models kits sold. Every almost this Russian science fiction came with the rise of Star Wars in the Hollywood. It opened a new age in science fiction in general. Uh, Further, meanwhile, Cine Animation, a TMS subsidiary, decided to bring back Doraemon, a comedy series based on the manga about a time-traveling cat robot that had previously been adapted to the small screen in 1973. This version lasted 26 episodes, but Cine's Doraemon would carry on for an astounding 1,787 episodes. It ended in 2005, only to be revived immediately a month later with a new Doraemon series featuring updated designs and voice actors. Still produced by Cine and still going. Another notable series of this kind was Heidi of the Alps, created by former Mushi Pro staffers in Nippon Animation, which boasted the directive of Hayao Miyazaki. We'll talk about him later. And Star Blazers was one of the names. Space Battleship Yamato was dubbed in America. It kind of used the prominence gained by Star Wars as its own market. Now, this is the original Doraemon series. You can see the picture here. The 1980s is called the golden age of anime, as it showed a huge explosion of genres and interest. Mamoru Oshii directed Urusei Yatsura in 1981 for Studio Pierrot, founded just 2 years later by former animators of Tatsunoko Pro and Mushi Pro. The series based on Rumiko Takahashi's manga about a lecherous human, the playful alien he accidentally becomes engaged to, and their friends became a huge hit and introduced the now practically required practice of promoting pop songs via the show's opening and ending sequences. VHS and other home recording or playing devices were coming onto the market in the early 80s, and anime was at the forefront. Urusei Yatsura was available on late 1983, and the OVA, original video animation, Japan's version of straight to DVD movie, was invented in the same year. No one interested in the first OVA, Oshi's moves, but it will take long before more popular titles began driving the market upwards.
Sorry to interrupt, Shomudip. Can you come a little more close to your microphone? Yes.
Another tech, yes, ma'am.
Can you come a little more close to your Can you come a little more close to your microphone?
Okay. Yes, yes, sure. Okay. Now, another technological first in 1983 was the CGI, computer generated imagery. TMS Golgo 13 was used CGI in several scenes, including the most notable scene, the helicopter circling a skyscraper. It was the first significant use of CGI in an animated film, not just in Japan, but anywhere. Also, Daikon Films was founded in 1984 by a group of university students promoting the otaku culture itself. In 1986, Toei animated Akira Toriyama's Dragon Ball. The show proved incredibly popular, to put it lightly. If there is a shonen targeted at boys around the ages 6 and 15, series you have watched in a series you have watched in the last 30 years featuring drawn out battles and ever increasing hero power ups, then its author probably watched Dragon Ball or its successor Dragon Ball Z as a kid. Anime sources were expanding, and manga, novels, and original stories continued to be as popular choices as ever. But video games, 1986 Super Mario Brothers, and light novels, 1988's Legend of the Galactic Heroes, would soon prove fruitful ground as well. Hayao Miyazaki is the legendary figure in anime. Hayao Miyazaki began to work in animation industry in the 1970s. In the late 1980s, he co-founded Studio Ghibli after the success of his film Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Studio Ghibli, over the next decades, produced some of the most popular and successful stories ever. These include Laputa, Castle in the Sky, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, and many others. Miyazaki directed some, but not all of them. Miyazaki claimed he would be retiring after the 2013 Studio Ghibli animated film The Wind Rises, but there has been evidence that is not the case. Apparently, he is coming back with his new film Boro the Caterpillar. Here you can see the poster of Nausicaa of the Valley, the Wind, and Castle in the Sky's poster. And now, in the 1990s, the anime uh, as a medium kind of crashed. As budgets never go up indefinitely and Japan's economy crashed in 1991, the many anime film and OVA studios were closed. Studio Ghibli countered the storm on the strength of their latest hit, Kiki's Delivery Service, and TV continued to be a fertile ground for funding. Toei released Sailor Moon in 1992, for example, to huge commercial success. In 1995, Gainax released Neon Genesis Evangelion, a deconstruction of the giant robot genre full of intriguing iconography, dark themes, and broken but likable characters. It immediately caught the attention of anime world and would have an influence on robot shows going forward that cannot be overstated. In addition to its states on robot technology and the psychology of using teenagers as pilots, Evangelion's two main heroines left huge marks on the anime world. Asuka and Rei, respectively, characterized what would come to known as the popular tsundere and moe personality styles. Tsundere refers to a person who is at first cold but gradually opens up to others, and moe is someone doing cutesy things and someone you would develop intensive protective feelings for. Now, anime was continuing to grow up and diversify. OVAs were becoming gory, experimental, or historically random and comedic as writers could dream of. Late night anime like serial experiments in Lane in 1998 differed into serious philosophical themes with stylish and sophisticated animation. Speaking of style, Studio Bones was founded in 1998 by Sunrise staffers, and their first project was a collaboration with Sunrise to make the judge's face from Cowboy Bebop, knocking on heaven's door. Here are the posters of Neon Genesis Evangelion and Sailor Moon. Now, this one everyone knows. The first anime based on a video game was Super Mario Brothers, a great mission to rescue Princess Peach. But in 1986, the genre came into its spectacularly own and profitably with Pokemon in 1997, which went on to become the world's biggest franchise and is still on air. Of course, everyone knows about Pokemon. Now, the 2000s. Since the mid 1930s, anime had been almost exclusively animated on cells. During the 90s, CGI became increasingly commonplace as a supplemental technique. The ease with computers could manipulate images even won over traditional animation purist Miyazaki, who used CGI on 1997's Mononoke Hime to animate demonic tendrils and a few other effects after his staff demonstrated how seamlessly they could blend the animation in. The first completely computer animated anime, Alice, arrived in 1999. Being still relatively early CGI, it didn't really look like anime. Surprisingly popular, and most studios have made the switch as soon as 2005. The last holdout was Icon with Sajai-san, the longest-running animated show in the world. If it isn't broke and your graphics haven't evolved too much from your 1969 origins, why fix it? They must have thought this. But even Sanjay-san eventually bowed to modern convenience and made the digital switch. In the early 2000s, anime was once again flourishing. A series of hits buoyed the market both at home and abroad. These included long runners like One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach, commonly known as the Big Three, that cross-promoted manga sales, movies, video games, and merchandise, with no end to their runs and slabs. Overseas licensing boomed. Here are the posters of the Big Three. Almost anyone who heard about anime knows about that. Now, the experimental late night anime trend popularized by serial experiments Lane also continued in the 2000s. With the anime such as Boogie Pop Phantom or Paranoia Agent, etc. In addition to these, the 2000s are also characterized by an increase of moe style art and Bishoujo and Bishonen character design. There was a rise in presence and popularity of genres such as romance, harem, and slice of life. I'll talk about them later. Anime based on eroge and visual novels increased in popularity in the 2000s, building on a trend started in the late 1990s. by such works as Sentimental Journey, Fates Stay Night, or Planet. Many shows have been adapted from manga and light novels, mainly Japanese pulp fiction, including popular titles such as Yu-Gi-Oh! Of 2000s, Naruto and Naruto Shippuden, Fullmetal Alchemist and Monster, Death, and of course Death Note, etc. These shows typically last several years and achieve large fan bases. Nevertheless, original anime titles continue to be produced with the same success. The 2000 marked an emphasis of the otaku subculture. A notable critique of otaku subculture is found in the 2006 anime Welcome to NHK, which features an shut-in or called hikikomori, socially withdrawn protagonist, and explores the effects and consequences of various Japanese subcultures such as otaku, lolicon, internet suicide, and massively multiplayer online games and multi-level marketing. Another thing that has been seen in this era was rebooting the earlier anime series in the forms of Fist of North Stars or Dragon Ball Z Kai. Later series also started receiving revivals in the late 2000s and early 2010s with Studio Kihara's rebuild of Evangelion tetralogy that is still going on, and new adaptations of Masamune Shidou's manga Applicid 13 and Ghost in the Shell. This decade also put revival to the high-budget feature-length films such as Millennium Actress of 2001, Metropolis, Paprika, and many others. The Satoshi Kon established himself alongside Otomo and Oshii as one of the premier directors of anime film before his premature death at the age of 46. Other young film directors were Mamoru Hosoda, director of The Girl Who Left Through Time and Summer Wars, also began to reach prominence. Now, during this decade, anime feature films were nominated and won major international film awards for the first time in the industry's history. In 2002, Spirited Away, a Studio Ghibli production directed by Hayao Miyazaki, won the Golden Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival, and in 2003, at the 75 Academy Awards, it won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. It was the first non-American film to win the Oscar and one of the only to do so. It has also become the highest-grossing anime film with a worldwide box office of US dollar 2,274 million. This era also showed the rise of anime-influenced animation, most notably Avatar: The Last Airbender. You can see its poster here, and also Samurai Jack, Ben 10, and Teen Titans. The 2010s. In May 2012, the Toonami block in the US was relaunched as an adult-oriented action block on Adult Swim, bringing uncut anime to a far wider audience. In addition to re-releasing older shows, the block, as well as Adult Swim itself, oversees the premiere of English dubbed releases from various new shows, including Deadman Wonderland, Parasite, Attack on Titan, Sword Art Online, One Punch Man, and many others. On September 6, 2013, Hayao Miyazaki announced that Wind Rises will be his last film, and on August 2014, it was announced that Studio Ghibli was temporarily halting production following the release of When Marnie Was There, further substantiating from the finality of Miyazaki's retirement. The disappointing sales of Isao Takahata's comeback film The Tale of Princess Kaguya in 2013 has also been cited as a factor. Now, in 2011, Purella Maji Madoka Magica was aired in Japan. This anime was a change from normal magical girl anime, as this anime contained more darker, complex, and gorier themes than magical anime girl anime usually had. Both Attack on Titan and The Wind Rises reflect a national debate among the surrounding reinterpretation of Article 9 of the Constitution of Japan, with Miyazaki's pacifism in the film coming under fire from the political right, while Attack on Titan has been accused of promoting militarism by people in neighboring Asian countries. Despite being intended to show the haunting, hopeless aspects of conflict. Now, Western streaming services such as Netflix and Amazon Prime are increasingly becoming involved in production and licensing of anime. In recent days, anime rose to prominence with the monumental success of 2016's Your Name, directed by Makoto Shinkai, that went on to become the highest-grossing anime movie of all time. In 2020, there are almost 227 animes coming on air. You can see the poster of Your Name here. Now, the genre advance. Anime's rise to prominence, it doesn't really mean viewers in English-speaking world know the medium from inside and out. Quite a reason for which we are holding this presentation. Anime is a storytelling ecosystem unto itself that must be understood as such. Many genres of anime are now well-established parts of an industry that began relatively recently in the 1970s and 80s. That's why we're here with a primer on the major genres found in anime, aside from the regular action, adventure, or comedy, tragedy, fantasy, and mystery tropes. We'll talk about some of anime or manga's exclusive genres. The first one is shonen. Almost any anime that you have watched or what comes to mind is likely shonen. From Dragon Ball Z to My Hero Academia and Naruto, almost all the flagship titles of anime are comfortably shonen, despite how widely their contents may vary. That's because shonen really just means for boys, making it more of a demographic category than a genre. Shonen anime encompasses an enormous variety of subgenres. Sports, fantasy, science fiction, and even horror stories are found in beneath its umbrella. Later comes shoujo. Sailor Moon, Cartoon Raptor, Sakura Fruits Basket, Nana, they might range far and wide in terms of story. But all these stories are shoujo. Like other entries on the list, shoujo targeted for young girls is technically a demographic, word by time and export into a genre term. Accordingly, shoujo anime ranges far and wide in terms of subject matter. What unites shoujo is an emphasis on relationships, for one thing. Most obviously, it evidenced by shoujo's plethora of romance series. Now comes seinen. Technically, seinen just boils down to meaning anime for young men, meaning it's for a bit mature readers. In practice, this translates to a wide variety of stories that can portray R-rated levels of violence and sexuality, murkier morals, and characters that are not promised any sort of absolution. There aren't stories about people looking to save the world. In fact, they often about who tried and failed and now live in the wreckage of that dream. But don't think it's all doom and gloom. Through crime, action, psychological horror, and particularly dark takes on science fiction and fantasy, often the order of the day. Comedy also falls under the seinen umbrella as well. Next comes josei. Josei is specifically targeted at mature women. It is where you will find relationships examined beyond the initial kiss, lives after the graduation, and low more action and between the sheets. The distinction might appear to be murky. Josei anime like Paradise Kiss, Princess Jellyfish, and Kids on the Slope deal with breakups, makeups, and all the attendant drama, just as anime aimed at younger girls might do. But here, the starring couple might end up with fully, finally incompatible, and the road to a better life might require brutal years of change, heartbreak, and disappointment. That's not to say Jose is an entirely melancholy affair, quite the opposite. In fact, slice of life Jose can find transcendent joy and laugh out loud humor in observing the rhythms of life in Restaurante Paradiso's bustling restaurant or the world of classical music portrayed in Nodame Cantabile. Next comes Echi. Ecchi is a flexible word in the anime. It can be used as an adjective or to describe something sexual in a way that connotes naughtiness, sort of like describing a magazine as dirty. It can be noun applied to someone who is a bit of pervert. You can likely guess why this genre is known as ecchi by this point. If it's sexy, naughty, risk, and or flirty, it's equally itchy. There is a major distinction to be mindful when it comes to ecchi. It's sexy, but it's not pornographic. Although H&M anime will refer to sex, even revolve around sex, but is absolutely meant to entice. And Echi doesn't depict actual uncensored sex acts, nor is it totally bereft of plot or character development. In fact, there are great many Echi series that are as beloved for their world building and story as for their panty shots and double entendres. Next come harems. Typically, harem series centers around an average man somewhere between 15 and 30. He's likely a little rootless, unsure of what he wants in life, nursing a passion he has yet to properly pursue. Then he finds that he is here to an fantastic destiny, about to be posted a job in girls' school or simply dials the wrong number, and suddenly his life is crowded with gorgeous girls, all of whom, from the wackiest rabble rouser to the most demure damsel, want desperately to be with him. Many harem series incorporate other genres, but don't think harem is an entirely dude-centric affair. Reverse harem series in which multiple boys vie for a girl's affection are a small but mighty minority within the genre, represented most famously by Oren High School Host Club. Next comes Isekai. You can talk about fiction without talking about escapism. Isekai anime takes this to another level by building a genre entirely around ordinary people being whisked away to fantasy worlds. Sometimes they are familiar with the worlds in question, sometimes they are allowed to bring along their smartphone, or sometimes they are reincarnated as a slime. But one thing holds true across the trope or plot, they were an ordinary person in our ordinary world, and now, by virtue of being transported to a very different land, they have become extraordinary. Isekai exploded in popularity in the 2010s with the Sword Art Online series. There seems to be no end to stories about world jumping, strat manipulating, and smart food building. But Isekai has been part of anime since the beginning. Magic Knight's Riot, even Studio Ghibli's Spirited Away, all fall under its umbrella. Moreover, not every isekai unfolds according to the most obvious plot tropes here. The devil is a part-timer, for one example, deposits a fantastical being, in this case Satan, the devil himself, into our everyday world, who cares nonetheless for demons, dragons, magic or anything. Or rather, he is a McDonald's employee who likes his signature salt and pepper French fries. Isekai, beyond anything, it's all about watching a fish out of water assimilate into a new ocean, and that's a fantastically flexible premise indeed. Next comes mecha anime. I talked about mecha before, but mecha anime, the genre to which giant robot anime belongs, is likely what many picture when they think of anime as a whole. Although the early works like Messenger Jed and gave set the stage for genre tentpoles like Full Metal Panic and the Mobile Suit Gundam series, creating a history work that continues today. brash pilots in enormous robots fighting for what's right. It's a premise that we just won't quit. But an important distinction must be made that within Mecha as a genre, there are super robot stories about enormous humanoid robots with incredible powers and real robot stories, which stick closer to the limitations of our own world. Some series does blend the two, most notably Neon Genesis Evangelion. You can see the poster of it here. Infamous for blurring all sorts of genre lines, does this, but the two approaches claim a wealth of distinct work all on their own. Now, slice of life. Nowadays, the most famous anime genre, it's all in the name. When one comes to the slice of life anime, it's a genre containing stories that observe everyday life as it is lived by an individual or group of characters. This is an anime that glories in the details, drawing meaning from events as intimate as a single meal or school ceremony. No one is going Super Saiyan or no one is getting into that story, it's all robot. Life is being lived in whatever form that takes. Be it in a group of friends and solving around mysteries in high school, like in Hyoka, or in a group of friends participating in musical concerts like K-On! It's about people living life one day at a time. Sometimes with dragons, though, like in Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. Next come Kodomo Nuke. Many of those unfamiliar with anime might think the entire medium could be described as children's stuff. And what Kodomo Nuke anime is, in short, the actual kid stuff for the youngest viewers out there. Some Kodomo Muke series are extremely familiar, like Pokemon, Yokai Watch, or Shinchan. But many, however, are not. Do not consider Doraemon. At most, a Western fan might recognize the titular character from the piece of merchandise as the local anime convention, but few are actually familiar with the robotic cat story, apart from the children who obviously are enticed by it. This character is a Japanese institution. Next come Yashike. Yashike, which means healing, is a bit tricky to describe. Often it overlaps with other genres, especially slice of life. It's really hard to tell them apart, and is more defined by the experience of watching it than the actual story content. Some very smooth plot. It is an anime that suits you as you watch it. Gorgeously painted backgrounds, gentle scenes of nature, and people working together towards a greater goal. That's the stuff of Yashike, the animated equivalent of a long hot bath. Now, why is anime so popular? There is a variety of anime created with seemingly every possible audience in mind. Now, one might understand call how is that? There are anime for small children, anime for teenagers, and anime for adults, as we have seen. There are anime for people who like cooking, like food wars, and people who like football, people who like rom-coms, and people who like action adventure. If you can think of a topic, there is probably an anime about that. Much like other types of film and television, some anime are serious in tone, and some are essentially nonsense. Another reason for anime's comparatively widespread popularity in Japan versus, for instance, India is that manga or comics are much more of a mainstream media in Japan. They could be found anywhere, and the comic book subculture is, let's say, not much part of the Indian children or even college students like me. So we come to the next picture. As we see, anime has a influence, very much influence and impact on the world at large. The popular 90s series, the film series, The Matrix, was inspired by the Ghost in the Shell anime series, as it has been shown. And later, Brian and later Darren Adams, who is Black Swan, the American masterpiece, was clearly, if not to say, plagiarized by Satoshi Kon's 2001 film Perfect Blue. There are almost no differences between the films. We can't even say it is influenced by the Perfect Blue, but rather totally plagiarized. Now, how it influences young people. For many young people in India and other countries, anime is the first introduction to Japanese culture and history. In this way, anime serves as a valuable form of culture and exchange and education. For a fair number of non-Japanese who end up living, working, or going to school in Japan, anime has served as first catalyst to their academic or professional journeys abroad. At a time when many young people often still know very little of life in other countries, anime is a vital vehicle for young people. It can help them gain of knowledge, curiosity, and acceptance. Now, anime in India. Now, these days, anime in India is, so I'm sorry to say, it's largely ignored as cartoons. Maybe it's from the adult perspective that it is seen as cartoons, and children who grew up watching Doraemon or Shinchan or Ninja Hattori, many other things, they learn them as cartoons, and they learn to distinguish them from cartoons when they entered high school or, in many cases, college. And this adult perspective of uh, seeing all of this as a children's stuff is very much making the anime in India mutating. It's deteriorating. Before there was Animax, a channel specifically for anime that showed many dubbed anime of latest releases, but unfortunately it's closed till now. Although the people are gathering now, many anime cults and many anime fan clubs have been created in India throughout. And last year, Weathering with You, from the maker Makoto Shinkai, the maker of 2016's blockbuster Your Name, was premiered in India, organized by many anime fan clubs. So I have to say the culture is spreading. And now the very first Indian anime is happening in our own Kolkata. And with the name Karma Chakra. Rajarshi Dattagupta and his studio Durga is very much fighting for anime here. So I'll ask everyone to try and watch this Karma Chakra to show your support to this medium and make it happen so Indian fans can watch anime legally here. Now, with this, I would like to conclude my presentation with this epilogue. As anime is a very relatively new media, only about 100 years old, but has become an incredible part of both Japanese and global popular culture. And it will be fascinating to see how this media will expand, change, and develop in the decades to come. Now, thank you. I will end my presentation here.
Thank you so much, Shomodeep. And your paper was so historical and therefore a little more heavy. So we will go on to the quickly, and I would really thank both the presenters. We can see from the chat box that even Madam is thanking, Pompey Ma'am is thanking both of you. So, yeah, I can't see any questions in the chat box, but I have, a few doubts which I would want to clear. I mean, try to, ask both of you. So one thing is, the text that Shogoto chose, "Kids on the Slope." I mean, I could see a lot of, say, say. A conflict and also resisting the mainstream codes of conduct by say the white the sheet, the cultural the differences, and also jazz as a symbol of resisting the mainstream system that hegemonizes individuals. So does anime also have that kind of a resistive does it also deals with narratives which resist the grand narratives, which resist the mainstream hegemonic systems that we are forced to live and accept?
Yes, ma'am. There are many anime series or films that gradually resist the system or shows a rebellious trope. Many there. And, I would very much recommend Parasite and The Maxim or Tokyo Ghoul, which are gradually uh, কি বলবো, a representation of modern society that shows how much society pressures on the children or adolescent mind.
Right. And
Ma'am,
yes, Shogato, yes, yes. Yes, Shogato, you wanted to say something? Shogato, I can't hear you.
Shogata?
so
Yes, Shogato, yes.
hmm. Oh, okay. Then I'm talking about homosexuality.
Mhm.
I think it is also included in the resistance that you are talking about, ma'am. Am I right, ma'am?
Homosexuality is just one aspect. I'm asking about any
Mm-hmm.
kind of resistance
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
because
I am
manga.
talking about that aspect. Please let me continue.
Yes.
So homosexuality is a very popular genre in the Japanese manga culture, and if we there are also so much gay comics that are usually known as aoi. The spelling is yaoi, and it is known as BL manga in English, means boys love. And also the lesbian mangas also are famous very. That is also known as Yuri. In English, it is known as GL, or girls love. Here we can say a rebellious type of thing. That is homosexuality. It is not so much recognized in our society.
Right. And
And there are almost a large variety of transgender characters that we can see in anime or manga, almost from the beginning of them. So it can also
Uh,
be a
yeah, yeah.
rebellious trope.
Shomodip, also the cross dressing thing. A boy trying to act like a girl, wearing the dresses of a
Yes,
girl, doing makeups.
what about
that kind of thing we found in anime from the beginning of the medium.
right? And what about crime? Is it shown in a gray manner in both animes and manga? Like, because we often we often see crime with a very binary concept, like we marginalize them, we kind of believe in capital punishments. So how is crime shown in manga and anime?
I think we can see here a new definition of morality in the case of Tokyo Ghoul or in the case of Parasite. Shomodip, I am not a fan of action genre. You can continue.
Okay, and then I will. Thank you, Shogoto. Crime is a very gray area in anime many anime deals with the criminal's perspective. In case, I would like to talk about Terror in Resonance, that features two high school boys performing a terrorist act in the first sequence itself. They bomb and literal tower, and many people die. And but we are gradually shown their own perspective behind it, whatever made them do it, and how much their life was affected by the society itself. And then we can talk about another great series. I personally recommend it as Monster. It talks about a doctor who once performs a uh, surgical case that where he either can save the mayor or a little child. And he chooses to save the child as a child is an untapped potential. However, that child transforms to become the greatest mass murderer in the history of the country. So once the doctor finds out about this, he tries to make amends and hunt down the killer. And there is also Death Note, the legendary anime series or manga itself, that deals with a literal diary on which any name you write, the person will die. And its protagonist is basically the greatest known anti-hero till anime, till now in anime.
Right, right. So, like since you have the murder of Roger Ackroyd in your syllabus, I would later, once you complete the novel, I'll just let me know if you have found, because ultimately murder is also a post-war fiction, and how is a crime kind of viewed, and if there is any similarity between the two genres that that you spoke about, and the novels. And one thing which I liked about one thing which I noticed is mm, one thing that you said that manga no there was this anime in India is often confused with cartoons. So yes, that is something that that derogates the quality and the way the approach to animes. Like cartoons, if I'm not mistaken, are cartoons films which do not have much overlaps, but animes do have. So if I say that if I mistake anime with a cartoon, if I call an anime a cartoon, am I trying to oversimplify the complexities that anime deals with?
Yes, ma'am, it would certainly be so. As
Yes.
cartoons have been there for almost the beginning since India's freedom, and but the animation industry in India is still relatively poor
Right,
compared to the other many countries.
right, right.
Although anime is gradually forming up here,
Mm-hmm.
before South Korea, as a notable extension of Japan, is forming itself the animation industry that is currently rivaling Japan. And many webtoons and One Punch Man or Tower of God, they are coming having anime adaptations directly in South Korea. So the same outsourcing can be done in India as well. And there
Okay.
have been Indian animes before. A very good interpretation of Ramayana, called Ramayana, the Legend of King Ram, has been done 20 years ago, although it was very much critically the response, and it was heavily censored due to some gory and bloody scenes. So it wasn't much popular. And there was also the Jungle Book, which is popular, but many think it is a cartoon.
Right, right, right. So I think in the chat box, Shubhojit had mentioned of Death Note. So when we were talking about crime, so is it something that you would like to comment on?
Yes, ma'am. I would comment about that. Death Note is really a crime thriller, and features one of the most intensive rivalries between a detective and the criminal. As we see in Death Note, between the rivalry between light and air, often described as the greatest rivalry in the history of anime, as both are almost Einstein level geniuses, as they themselves boast about. And after L, the series itself does goes down the drain. So L and Light, as their rivalry is talked about, and it is often talked about as Holmes and Moriarty. So that would probably show how high their level is.
Right. So you see, morality and the ideas of crime, punishment, they are challenged, right? In these mediums.
Yes, these days there is Attack on Titan, which is gradually becoming prominent and almost as much as Game of Thrones, if I may say. And its final arc in the manga is going on, although the anime is scheduled to come out later in 2020 itself. Uh, it, fe- uh, it features the protagonist committing a mass genocide. So there is a really morally gray area there. And the perspective of crime is heavily talked there, as the protagonist himself keeps dwelling whether it is to do the right thing or to do not. What is even the right thing? That is the question. As it is a very nihilistic story, I would have to say.
So I was just wondering. I mean, the anime and both the manga industry, I think, is more complex than, say, the Americans. Because if you see Tintin, when I'm observing Tintin, of course, the artist who basically deals with the technical aspect of the drawings in the comics would probably be able to comment better, and we have to study on that. But do you think that Tintin is much more a simplified version than this entire Japanese anime and the manga industry?
Well, talking about the Tintin's time span and where it's set in, it is simpler, but there are also the Marvel DC comics or the Image comics, and we have to talk about Sir Alan Moore in the Western comics world, where many of the very great quality comics have been produced, which, if I may say, might be on par or top the Japanese manga or anime series itself. Although there are many great manga or anime series, I have to say about One Piece itself. Although it is not much popular outside world, in Japan it is talked about as if it is an epic. And it is still going on today. Almost nine generations have read it, so you can guess how much it is worth. But Tintin is simplified, but there are many other Western comics that might top the Japanese manga.
Right.
So the comparison quite be
Uh,
quite
I
difficult,
think
very difficult.
I think the main difference is in the quality of the art. Despite of being black and white, Japanese comics, the art quality is totally very, very, very high. I think they have the best art quality in the world.
Right.
That
Right.
makes the huge difference.
Right. Right. So art quality. I
Yes,
mean, you
and
have a
they
paper.
only black and white.
Right, right.
Yes,
You have
continue.
a lecture on. I have spoken to Pinakida, and he kind of wants to talk about partition and Indian comics. So maybe he kind of works very hard with this entire anime and manga as well. So he's specializing and working on projects on that. So I will whenever he comes for a lecture, you can have your conversations with him maybe. And also, we need to yes, the art quality that you mentioned about is something that also we need to be technical about it, because when we are doing the text, the Tintin, we need to exactly know what kind of art is the illustrator specializing in when he's sketching the pictures. If we don't know that, then our reading of the text will not be kind of fulfilling, I think. Because whenever whoever is talking about manga, I think the art quality and the way it is drawn, I mean, what is the name of the sketch, or whether the science behind it, I think that is something that we have to know. Otherwise we will not be able to read the text. I mean, that is what I feel. Any Even for manga, yeah, I mean, you have to know what kind of drawing goes into it, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am, that is certainly so. And there is a very good difference between Western and comics and Japanese manga that I forgot to mention. In the origin, or if I may say, in the 1950s or 60s, the Western comics used to be published in comic, especially in comic magazines. We see it in our own localities as well, like Anandamela or Chandmama. Especially magazines that feature comics. The same used to happen in Western comics or in Japanese comics. But nowadays, we see there are many comic industries itself has flourished in the West, and there are many comic groups or companies that keep producing their titles separately. However, in Japan or in South Korea, the comics are, I'm sorry, the mangas are still produced in magazines. And after 3 or 4 issues, if the sales are not high and if the readers don't take them much well, even a good story can be dropped and can be sent to the drain. So this is a hurdle that Japanese comic artists have to face head on. This is a special hurdle that they face. It is not found in the Western.
Right, right. Also, we can't, we don't have much time. We've already kind of exhausted our 2 hours here. I would just, later on, if you can also, you need not answer it right now. You can think over it and let me know. Maybe write it in the group so that all of us can get this. What I understand is the West is a capitalist civilization, and the South Asian countries, Japan, India, the rest of the South Asian countries like Singapore, etc., they have always have had a feudalistic society. So is the animation, I mean, whether produced by the West and or by by Japan, how does capitalism and feudalism play a role in the production of the industry, the respective industries of both the civilizations, the nations that we are talking about? So this is something that maybe you can think over and let me know, and let all of us know. Maybe you can write it in the WhatsApp group for us, because we are really short of, we've already exhausted our 2 hours. So I don't know if there are any more. No, there, I can't see any more questions. So shall we call it a day, Shogata and Shomo? So shall we end the meeting here?
Uh,
Okay, ma'am, sure.
Shogata, do you want to say anything?
okay. Ma'am, I can see here a question. Animes are more action-packed. I should better say mangas. Rudradipta Mukherjee is saying.
Yes, yes. I mean, I thought that was a comment. Yes, rather than a question. Yes, but you can if you want, you can answer. I mean, comment on it.
Okay, first, Rudolito, you have to remember that mangas come first, not anime. And the primarily there are two genres: shonen for boys, that is action and other things included, and shoujo for girls. And shoujo genre is all about romance. So also there is slice of life genre. There is rom com, means romantic comedies, and so you can find, primarily you can find two type of audience in the case of anime. One kind of is who love to see romantic type of things, and the other kind of who like to see the action type of things. And so I have also read uh, so much manga about romance, so you can't say that manga is about action packed. And I think you should explore this area more. You should have to read it more.
Okay, okay.
So, man, that's all.
Right, right. So, thank you so much. It has been a very, very detailed, paper, both of you, and also our discussions have been endless because, and still stretching because we know very, very less about this area, and we would really love to know more about it. So, thank you once again, Shogoto and Shomodeep, for your hard work, and thank you all, dear students, for joining us. We can see that it's already lunchtime, and many of us have lost patience, but nevertheless we have managed to scrape through this and really well. And the YouTube video, I will shall be available with you in a short while, so you can always listen to it later for a better understanding. So thank you very much. Goodbye for today.